Hay thought the barking would stop by nightfall, but the dog stayed rooted by the old barn, hackles high, eyes locked on that splintered door like it was holding back a ghost. The sheriff's men muttered it was just rats or a coyote, maybe the echo of something long dead. But K9s don't bark like that for nothing. When they finally opened it, the smell hit first, then the silence, then the sound. A girl's cry, hoarse and raw, coming from the shadows, shackled to rusted chains. If this kind of story stays with you, stay with us. The first bark echoed just after dawn. Sheriff Wyatt Greer was already halfway through his third cup of Folgers when the call crackled over dispatch. Unit 9 reports continuous K9 alert, South Pasture, Old Miller Barn. He set the mug down without sipping. That barn hadn't been touched in years. Not since Cal Miller died and left it to rot beside his collapsed silo. The local kids used to dare each other to peek inside. Most came back quiet, eyes low. Greer chalked it up to snakes or the smell of rot. Still, that barn had a way of making people uneasy. He grabbed his hat and keys, leaving his eggs to cool. The cruiser crunched over frost-laced gravel as he approached the edge of Jasper's old farmland. Beyond the ridge, the barn sat like a scar in the pasture, its slanted roof half caved in, beams gray with rain and time. Morning mist rolled low across the field. The fog felt heavy, wet, like breath too close to your skin. And there was Titan. The black German shepherd stood stiff-legged beside Deputy Riley's SUV, every muscle locked, ears sharp, barking hard and fast at the barn's closed door. Not frenzied, focused, methodical, the kind of bark that said something is inside and it is wrong. Greer stepped out, the cold biting into his collarbones. Riley. He'd been at it long. Riley didn't take his eyes off the barn. His face was pale under the brim of his cap. 3 hours straight. He's not eating, not drinking. I tried calling him off. He nearly bit me. Greer stared at the barn, unease slowly coiling inside his gut. Anyone inside? No tracks. No lights. Just barking. Could be a raccoon. Or a bobcat. Sheriff, Riley said, voice low. He's crying between barks. Like something's hurting him. Titan suddenly let out a growl, so low it vibrated through the cold. Then another bark. Short, sharp, almost desperate. Greer's hand hovered near his sidearm. Get me a crowbar. They didn't open the barn right away. Greer insisted on circling the perimeter first, eyes sweeping over broken windows, sagging rafters, warped wood. No footprints in the mud. No recent tire tracks. Just the wind pushing against the tin roof like a breath held too long. Inside, there was no movement, no voices, no light. The door groaned when they cracked it open. The stench it like a punch, sour, layered, animal and human. Greer gagged, pulling his collar over his nose. Titan stopped barking. He sat down, whined once. Then he backed away, tail tucked low, ears still forward. Flashlights, Greer ordered. The beams lit up dust swirls, cobwebs, haystacked in rotting heaps. A rusted tractor sagged in one corner, feed sacks gnawed by mice. A ladder broken halfway up led to a hayloft cloaked in shadows. Then came the sound. It wasn't a cry, not at first. More like breathing, shallow, wet, uneven. Then the rattle of metal. Chains. A whimper. Greer's flashlight steadied. There, beneath the old grain chute, hidden behind crates, was a girl. She looked about 17, covered in dirt. Her arms locked above her head and rusted iron cuffs bolted to the support beam. She was barefoot, skin raw, eyes swollen, blood crusted along her wrists and hairline. She didn't scream. She just looked at them like she'd forgotten how to believe people could be real. "Oh, my God," Riley murmured, lowering his radio. "Calling EMTs now." Her name was Callie. At least, that's what she whispered when they gently broke the cuffs and carried her out. She didn't speak much after that, not until the paramedics gave her something warm and the blanket covered her bruises. Even then, she only looked at Titan, reached a shaking hand toward the dog like he was something from a dream. He licked her palm, whined again. "He found me," she whispered, voice cracked from silence. Greer crouched beside her, try and keep his tone low, calm. "Do you remember how you got there, Callie?" She blinked at him, hesitated, then shook her head slowly. "No, just waking up. And dark. And chains. Every day was dark." Her fingers dug into the blanket. "Did you see anyone? Hear voices?" She didn't answer, but her eyes flicked toward Riley. Just for a second, then away. The hospital ran tests. She was severely dehydrated, malnourished, covered in small lacerations and healed-over bruises. But there was no evidence of sexual assault. Whoever had kept her there wanted her alive, but broken. Her records identified her as Callie Dunn, reported missing 6 weeks ago from 3 counties over. Her mother had collapsed during the press conference the day the search was called off. Greer watched it all from the corner of the nurse's station, hands folded, jaw tight. How the hell does a girl go missing from a church parking lot and wind up chained in a barn 60 miles away with no witnesses? No evidence, no prints, he muttered. No one answered. Later, the blood work showed a cocktail of sedatives in her system, long-term administration, just enough to keep her compliant. They returned to the barn with a full team. Forensics combed every inch, but the place was clean, too clean, as if someone had prepped it, removed every trace, bleached what needed bleaching. One thing stood out, a metal plate bolted inside the barn wall, painted a blend-in. It was new, welded into the structure like it had always been there. No prints, the tech told Greer. But see these scratches? Like fingernails. She tried digging herself out. Greer stared at the wall for a long time. That night, Titan refused to go home. He sat outside the hospital doors, head down, waiting. Inside, Callie asked to see him. The nurses allowed it. She cried when he entered, just folded into him and cried. Greer stood by the window, watching the two of them. Riley walked up beside him, his voice quiet. "She's scared of me." Greer's head turned. "What?" "When I walk in, she tenses, like she's waiting to be hit." Greer watched him closely. "You saying you did something, Riley?" "I'm saying I don't know what she thinks she remembers. But I didn't touch that girl. You know me." "I used to," Greer said. Riley looked away. Outside, Titan rested his chin on Callie's knee. 2 nights later, Callie tried to escape the hospital. She didn't make it far, only down the stairwell before a nurse found her. She was barefoot, sobbing, whispering something they couldn't quite make out. When Greer arrived, she was curled up in the corner of the hallway. He crouched beside her again, his voice gentle. "You're safe, Callie. You don't have to run anymore." She finally looked at him, something shifting behind her eyes. "You don't understand," she whispered. "He said you'd come, but you'd be too late. He said you wouldn't stop him next time." "Who said that?" Her lips moved, but no sound came. The barn was burned to ground the next morning. No witnesses, no prints, no gas can, just ash. Greer stood at the edge of the smoking ruin as Titan circled the edge, nose down, tail rigid. Then the dog stopped, body stiff, barking again. Not at the ashes, at the trees. Greer turned. A figure was watching from the woods. Then gone, just like that. Sheriff Wyatt Greer didn't chase the figure. Not that morning. By the time he crossed the field, boots crushing frosted grass. There were only broken branches and the scent of damp pine. Titan sniffed the trail for a few yards, then stopped cold. Hackles raised, nose twitching. A soft growl vibrated deep in his throat, as if he smelled something he didn't want to follow. Greer placed a hand on the K9's flank. "Easy." The dog stood his ground. They both knew someone had been there, watching, and whoever they were, they had wanted the barn gone. At the station, Greer stared at the whiteboard. 6 weeks, 60 miles. No cameras, no credit cards, no vehicles tied to Callie's disappearance. She'd vanished from a Sunday morning choir practice in Almsville, last seen by a deacon named Terrence Walsh, who said she went to the restroom and never came back. Her phone was found tossed in a ditch. Her social media went dark an hour before she disappeared. Not a single security cam picked her up from there to Jasper County. The barn she was found in had been empty for over a decade, or so they'd thought. and now it was ash. Burned clean. Greer picked up the phone and called Almsville PD. I want every name who's been inside that church in the past year. Staff, clergy, custodians, every face, every print. Callie wouldn't talk about the man. Not clearly. She spoke in fragments. Distant, dazed. He said I was chosen. Voices in the dark, one was his, the other not. They kept saying don't scream in the daylight. She said he smelled like wood smoke and engine oil, that his hands were clean, but his boots were always muddy. He never hit her, never touched her, but he watched her from the shadows, and sometimes he talked to her like she was a doll he'd lost and finally found again. Deputy Riley didn't like being sidelined. He sat stiffly in Greer's office, hands locked tight between his knees, cap pulled low over his brow. I want back in, he said. You're in, Greer replied. But don't go near the girl. Not until I say. Riley's jaw tightened. You think I did something. I think a girl looked at you like a ghost and won't say why. I did nothing to her, Wyatt. Greer leaned forward. You were at that patch the morning she was found. I was called in. No, you weren't, Greer said softly. Not officially. I checked dispatch logs. Your unit didn't report K-9 alert. You were already there when the call went out. Riley stared at him, then stood. You think I'm your bad guy, he muttered, after all these years. I think people get tired. They get dark. Sometimes they break, and sometimes they hide it real well. Riley opened his mouth, closed it, and walked out without another word. That night, Callie woke screaming. A nurse found her cowering in the bathroom, whispering, He's in the walls. He watches from the corners. Greer arrived 20 minutes later. Callie sat on the bed, eyes wide, shaking. Her voice was raw. He brought me food at the same time every day. Never spoke unless I cried. Then he'd whisper, real soft. Greer nodded slowly. Do you remember what he said? She nodded. He said, we all belong to someone. You just forgot who owns you. The fire investigation came back clean. Arson. Accelerant traces confirmed. Accelerant. Aviation fuel. Unusual. No one in town sold it. Closest place was near Lake Platte, an old airstrip once used by crop dusters, now abandoned. Greer drove out with Titan the next morning. The hangars were hollow, echoing wind and bird song. But in the far corner of one metal shed, Titan froze. He growled. Greer stepped closer. There were drag marks in the dust. Tire treads, recent, and in the corner, bits of burned plastic, blackened straps, a melted buckle, restraints. Titan began barking, sharp and fast. In the shadows of that hangar, Greer saw something he hadn't felt in years. A second set of boot prints. Fresh, circling his own. Back at the hospital, Callie sat near the window in a quiet room, wrapped in sunlight. Her arms bore faint bandage lines. Her eyes were softer today. I remember a song, she said. A song, the nurse asked gently. She nodded. He sang it. The man, it was old, from a tape. Country, maybe. She hummed a few bars. Off-key, slow, fragile. The nurse recorded it on her phone and played it for Greer. He didn't recognize it, but someone else might. That night, Titan woke Greer with a snarl. The dog had leapt from the floor to the bedroom window, teeth bared, growling low and dangerous. Greer grabbed his weapon and pulled the curtain. No one was there, just mist. But in the driveway, pressed into the frost on the hood of his truck, were fingerprints, long wet, smudged. He didn't sleep again. The church in Almsville gave up its tapes reluctantly, but one old camera, mounted in a hallway corner, caught something strange. The footage was grainy, but you could see Callie walking toward the bathroom at 10:32 a.m. Then, 10 seconds later, a man in dark clothes and a baseball cap followed her in. He never came out. Neither did she. At least, not on that tape. The camera was found damaged later that day. Shorted out. The man's face was never seen. But his posture, his shoulders, his build. Greer froze the frame. Then pulled a photo from his drawer. A snapshot of Riley at a barbecue 5 years ago. Same build. Same slouch in the shoulders. Same boots. Greer called him. Straight to voicemail. The cruiser was found at the county line, engine still warm. No sign of Riley. But taped to the inside of the windshield was a note. Greer peeled it off, hand shaking. The writing was rushed. "You're chasing the wrong man. I tried to stop him once. He said if I spoke, he'd take someone I love." Look into Deacon Walsh. Underneath it, one line scratched over and over again. She wasn't the first. Greer stared at the note long into the night. He thought of Callie's eyes, of the way Titan barked at the trees, and of what kind of man could make another run without a fight. Then he called a deputy to watch Callie's room and drove to Almsville. At the church, Deacon Terrence Walsh answered the door with a smile too wide. "Sheriff Greer," he said, "we've been praying for Callie's return. Such a tragedy. Such darkness in this world." Greer stared at him. "The world's got darkness, all right." The deacon's eyes twinkled. "I do hope you're here for spiritual support, not suspicion." Greer's mouth stayed dry. "What do you know about aviation fuel, Deacon?" The smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. Sheriff Greer stayed standing on the church steps longer than he needed to. Deacon Terrence Walsh stood just inside the doorway, the morning sun drawing soft golden lines across his starched white shirt. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, but Greer noticed his hands. They weren't clasped in front of him the way most men of faith stood. They were behind his back, as if hiding something, or holding on. "Mind if I step in?" Greer asked finally. The deacon smiled. "Of course, Sheriff. Our doors are always open to the law." The church was silent inside. Still smelled faintly of old pine cleaner and incense. Greer's boots echoed on the tile as he followed Walsh down the main aisle. Titan stayed just outside the door, planted like a statue, eyes locked on the deacon. "You have a dog with you," Walsh said, glancing back. "He's smarter than most people I know. Animals know good from evil, they say. That's what worries me," Greer muttered. Walsh led him to a small room off the sanctuary. Office-like, though sparsely furnished. A Bible, a file cabinet, a framed photograph of a woman and a little boy. Walsh noticed Greer's eyes settle on the picture. "My wife passed last year. Cancer. That's my boy, Ezra." Greer nodded slowly. "How old?" 7. "Where's he now?" Walsh tilted his head. "At his aunt's." "Why do you ask?" "Because the girl you said went missing after choir practice was abducted, chained, and hidden for nearly 2 months, and her abductor sang to her at night. The same song we heard on that old recording. I'm afraid I don't follow." Greer took the nurse's recording from his coat, played it. As the soft, off-key humming filled the air, the deacon's face shifted. Not a flinch, not a shudder, a smile, as if hearing an old friend. "I haven't heard that in years," he said quietly. "My wife used to sing it." "Funny thing," Greer said, "it's not a common tune. Only a handful of folks would recognize it. Less than that would use it to soothe a girl in chains." The silence grew tight between them. Walsh walked to the file cabinet, opened a drawer. "Sheriff," he said, not looking back, "some people, they crave control. They want obedience, not from cruelty, but from fear, because the world feels chaotic and they need something pure, still, like a girl too afraid to scream." The drawer slid open with a screech. Greer's hand moved to his hip, but Walsh only pulled out a cassette tape. "This sermon," he said, setting it on the table, "was recorded 10 years ago. My father's voice. He preached about the calling, about surrender. Some of his thoughts were extreme, but not illegal. He believed some were chosen by higher power to obey, not speak. That silence was holiness." Greer stared. "You still believe that?" Walsh turned. His face was calm, his hands empty. "I believe the world doesn't reward the quiet ones, so someone has to guide them." An hour later, Greer left with the tape and a nagging ache in his spine. No charges, nothing solid, just words. The courts didn't care much about sermons or strange songs. He returned to the hospital. Titan barked twice before they even entered the building. A nurse was crying behind the front desk. "What happened?" Greer asked sharply. "Callie's gone," she sobbed. "We checked at shift change. She was sleeping an hour ago. Then she wasn't. Security footage? Disabled, just like before." Greer's stomach dropped. Not again. Titan tore down the hall without command, leading them straight to the stairwell. The emergency exit door was cracked open. Greer stormed through it. Nothing, except at the base of the stairwell, drawn on the concrete with a child's crayon, was a symbol, a cross inside a circle. And beneath it, quiet as holy, the town lit up. Amber alert, state line broadcasts, FBI consults. But Greer knew better. This wasn't random. This was organized, personal. He returned to the note Riley left, looking to Deacon Walsh. She wasn't the first. He called retired detective in Almsville. Old case. A girl named Macy Wren. Disappeared in 1997. Never found. She sang in the same church choir. Same room. Same hallway. And her mother used to clean the deacon's house on weekends. Back when his father ran the pulpit. Greer didn't wait for a warrant. He and Titan drove to the deacon's house just past midnight. The property was dark, rural, isolated. A long gravel driveway bordered by trees. No lights, no movement. But Titan barked the moment they hit the gate. One long, furious bark. They approached slow. No vehicles in the drive. No signs of recent activity. But Greer noticed the garage door was open a crack. He stepped out, weapon drawn, Titan just behind. Inside the garage, the smell hit him. Oil, old hay, bleach, and blood. Not a lot, just a few drops. On the floor, leading toward a trapdoor. He lifted it and stared. Stairs, leading into darkness. Titan barked again, then whined, stepping back. Greer flicked on his flashlight and descended. The basement wasn't large. Just a dirt floor, brick walls, and an iron cage in the corner. It was empty, except for a pair of shackles. And a stuffed bear. Greer picked it up. The tag on the collar read EZRA. They found Walsh 2 towns over, driving his wife's old car toward the state line. He surrendered without a word. No fight, no expression, just peace. Like he believed he'd already won. Callie was found 3 hours later. She was locked inside a farmhouse crawl space, dehydrated but unharmed. The words "silence is love" were scratched into the wooden beam above her. She didn't cry when they opened the hatch. She just asked if Titan was there. And when he was, she buried her face in his fur and whispered, "I knew you'd hear me." Riley turned himself in the next day. He hadn't kidnapped her, but he'd known. Not about Walsh, but about something. Someone. He confessed being blackmailed years earlier, threatened by an anonymous man who knew secrets from his time in narcotics. Said if Riley didn't tip him off about patrols or surveillance gaps, someone would die. So he did. "God help me," he said. "I thought it was drug runners." Not that. Greer didn't forgive him, but he sat with him during the booking, silently. The court proceedings dragged for months. Walsh never spoke a word during the trial, not even when shown the photos, the tapes, the faces of the missing girls. But every day he wore the same thing, a small silver pin, a circle around a cross. Callie stayed with her aunt in the mountains after the trial. She didn't speak for weeks. Then slowly, softly, she began to write. Stories, mostly, about places she imagined when it was dark. Titan visited her once, during a road trip with Greer. When she saw him, she smiled for the first time. He listened, she said, when no one else did. Sheriff Greer never returned to the church. He retired 2 winters later. But sometimes, when the wind moved just right over the fields, he swore he heard a dog's bark echo near the old Miller farm. Not panicked, just calling, like a warning, or a reminder that the quiet ones still wait in the shadows. And someone always needs to listen,